Today, I'm going to talk about the first game that I designed. I did so at a company I've worked at the past several years called 24G. This is a game used by a major organization that's been played by thousands of people to help build empathy. It's also a game that I'm not really supposed to call a game. But speaking of empathy, before we start, I'd like to say a few words regarding recent events. Now is the time for all of us to use our voices and platforms to speak that which needs to be said. We must do this even if it makes us uncomfortable, even if we're afraid of others disagreeing with us and inciting conflict. Our nation is at a time of reckoning. This is true for many reasons, one of which is a pandemic that continues to test our limits. But right now, the tragic murder of George Floyd and countless other people of color has reinvigorated an outpouring of emotions and much-needed rallies for change. Police brutality is but one of the problems. We need to re-examine all our laws and ways of life, spell out the racism that has been there for centuries, and not rest until things are changed for the better of all. And for white folks like myself, what we absolutely need to do more than we are doing now. That is donating to individuals and organizations that drive change. It's calling out our peers when they do or say something problematic. And it is becoming better listeners and to accept feedback when we have done something wrong. I pledge to do better, to not let the momentum of recent events to go unspent, and to be a true ally to people of color. Black lives matter. As for today's story, well, it might seem strange, perhaps even a little problematic, to mention game design and play in regards to serious social and political movements. But games might just be one of the tools we need to achieve the goals of our time, and I hope to illustrate that to you now. All right, let's begin. This is The Curious Gamer, a show about the culture, design, and joy of games. I'm Devin Polaski. Today, I'm talking about a digital simulation called The Cost of Living, an experience I designed with my team at 24G. It was crafted for United Way for Southeastern Michigan. Let's start by meeting one of the people that helped bring this project to life.
My name is Valerie West, and I worked with United Way up until 2018, and I was the marketing director of communications. So United Way is a complex historical organization, and it does a lot of different things. And it was very complicated to explain what we were doing at United Way. And what we often found is we were throwing stats and figures at people, and we were really missing this moment to give an overview while also building empathy.
Most people have probably heard of United Way, but I'd wager few could really articulate what it does. There are over 1,000 United Way chapters all over the world. United Way is often a backbone of support to local organizations working to make a difference in their communities. I first met Valerie back in 2017. Me and some of my colleagues at 24G were invited to the offices of United Way for Southeastern Michigan, the largest United Way chapter in the state. They wanted us to help with the project, but they weren't quite sure what the shape of that project was just yet. So we went to downtown Detroit on a September afternoon and took a tour of their facilities.
And so the team had recently started doing these tours that you could come in and see the work and meet the people. And we had this sort of experience where you would come in and you'd get a placemat with these little beads, and a facilitator would walk you through sort of these scenarios. I personally never found that to be a really engaging experience. It wasn't tailored to me. It was the same thing. Everyone sort of ended up in the same spot.
This experience Valerie's talking about was called Making Choices. It's kind of like a board game, simulating what life is like at or below the poverty level. Each participant got these plastic tokens to manage a bare-bones budget and faced tough decisions, like whether you should give up food or electricity when your imaginary child needed surgery. This experience, while intriguing, lacked the emotional gut punch United Way was looking for to elicit donations, which are the lifeblood that enables United Way to support communities.
We had seen these sort of digital experiences done in places, but not well. And so we knew we wanted something. We just didn't know who could do it. And so that's when we were introduced to you guys at 24G. And I remember walking into 24G and just being blown away with how cool the space was. You have a bowling alley, you have a bar, it's fantastic. And I remember seeing some of the games that you had in these simulations. And we walk out into the parking lot and I asked our CMO, Chris Perry, I said, I think this is the team. We hadn't even left, right? We were not even in our cars. And I said, I think this is the team that we should work with. We'd worked with a lot of agencies in the past, but the one thing I always felt like what was happening is that because we were so complex, everyone wanted us to distill what we did into a sentence. And it's not possible to do that. Try as hard as I might in marketing to simplify it. There were 30 different programs under, 5 buckets of work at United Way. So it just became really complex to do that. And we felt that your team really tried to dive deep and understand the complexity. Because if you understood it, then maybe you could help us make it a little less complex to the users. And I always really appreciated working with you and with your team on that. And I know that the other folks at United Way felt the same way too.
So the challenge was, how could United Way's Making Choices activity be improved? How could our company's expertise in digital technology help accomplish this? And how could this thing, whatever it would be, evoke an urgent, empathetic response in participants and inspire them to donate their money and time to a good cause? This is the precise kind of challenge that 24G was born to solve. And to me, the best way to solve this problem was with game design. A lot of the media we consume every day aims to be simple, quick, and easy to digest. Sometimes games can be this simple, but more often, instead of embracing simplicity, games instead reject it. They can envelop us in rich, complex systems and encourage experimentation. They utilize failure as a means to learn and grow. This makes games a potent avenue for storytelling around topics that require nuance and complexity to properly comprehend. Stories that can't be explained with a simple marketing quip. However, United Way prefers to refer to this project not as a game, but as a digital simulation, and I'll honor that request. But more on this topic of semantics later, as I think it's something worth exploring. So when this project began in the fall of 2017, well, up to that point in my life, almost every creative project I had done involved making films, videos, animations, audio stories, original soundtracks, things that moved along a fixed timeline. But this project required me to put on a game designer hat for the first time. It was a tremendous learning experience that combined everything I had learned while also allowing me to draw from my love and history of playing games. It awakened a new side of me, and I started down a path where I could combine the best of all areas of creative work. This experience made me want to do this forever. So let me take a moment to peel back the curtain and let you all in on how the design process went for the cost of living. So to start, I decided to look back and analyze United Way's Making Choices activity. I wanted to take it apart into its individual building blocks and see what about it was actually working and what needed to change. The core idea from the original remains. In the cost of living, participants assign a limited number of asset tokens to 5 areas of your life: food, housing, childcare, healthcare, and education. These are the 5 main areas that United Way of Southeastern Michigan works to support in the region. Then we created 15 moments called life events. As you go through the cost of living, you will encounter 5 life events, each tasking you to make a difficult decision or to act quickly in a stressful scenario. And each life event is selected and ordered at random, making it so that the experience is different each time. Then our engineers pioneered a technology called Crowdplay. This engine allows for a game to be hosted on a big screen, like a TV or a laptop. And then players can use their own device, like a phone or tablet, as a controller for the game. Now, this idea isn't new. Popular games like Fibbage and Quiplash from the company Jackbox, well, they've brought this bring your own device technology to the mainstream. But normally, these games require a game console or some fairly powerful computer in order to play. But Crowdplay can be done entirely on a web browser. There's no app to download. Just type a simple link into your web browser. We did this not only to make it simple for United Way staff members to learn and deploy, but also to make it as easy as possible for anyone to jump into the experience, especially participants who are normally intimidated by games due to cumbersome setups and controls. Finally, the team came up with what would become the main attraction of this experience, the aha moment that forces you to question your actions, both in the game and in reality. I'll spoil what this is later, but building up to this moment and building the content of this experience in general required thorough research and acute sensitivity.
From the United Way side, right, like my role was sort of the project manager for United Way and getting that core group of subject matter experts, one, their buy-in on the project, because there's a lot of sensitivity around this. You see things like poverty simulations or, eating on $5 a day that really just, they don't cut it and can be really viewed negatively by folks who have actually been in deep poverty because they've oversimplified it. And so I don't think, the experience of cost of living, I know for a fact that it could not have been done without, those subject matter experts, those directors that ran the programs at United Way coming in and making sure that, one, we were factual, that we weren't, that we weren't doing stereotypes with people. That was really, really important. For the end user, it was still an experience for them, but that there was also just this really good research and depth behind it.
The subject matter experts from United Way were a diverse team deep in the trenches of this work and who intimately understood the struggles of the people United Way served. I remember coming up with several life events for the experience and submitting them to United Way, only to have many of them torn to shreds. But I quickly came to appreciate this process. The events I was writing came from the vantage point of someone who had not experienced these hardships firsthand. I was simply unqualified to tell these stories the way they needed to be told. These experts had a vision. They wanted to illustrate poverty as a failing of systems, not a failing of people, as if it's certain people's fault that they're in poverty, that they could just bootstrap their way out of poverty. Instead, it was more important to focus on systems and structures that exist in society, as well as the kinds of circumstances people can find themselves in, the tough choices they have to make, and how so many people are just one missed paycheck away from a crisis. Finding a way to tell this story factually and with sensitivity was the most challenging part of the design process. After months of hard work and collaboration between 24G and United Way, we finally completed the project. We debuted our creation at United Way's 101-year anniversary gala in April of 2018. We called this project The Cost of Living. So, this is the part where I play audio from the experience, but I narrated the cost of living, so it's just more of me talking. So the tone of voice I use and the type of music I composed, it's pretty similar to this podcast. So hopefully that's not too confusing. All right, so this is what you hear once the cost of living begins. We all want to be able to take care of ourselves and our families. But 44% of southeastern Michigan families are struggling to meet their basic needs. Right now, you will step into these shoes. You will roleplay through some real-life scenarios that people in our region face every day. You might just be one crisis away from real hardship. So join us as we experience the cost of living. Not long after the cost of living was completed, the torch of managing the project passed from Valerie to someone else at United Way. So can you tell us your name and what you do at United Way?
Sure. Name is Courtney Ochelik. Part of my role is educating people on who United Way is as an organization and what our partnerships look like throughout the communities. We're always looking for different ways to engage people and really teach them through experience. And I think one of the things that when cost of living was presented, it was almost lifted up to me as like a choose your own adventure through our type of work by really just sort of jumping into the shoes of someone who has to make these really difficult choices and what that looks like as it kind of plays out in real life. So for me, it was a super exciting time to start to brainstorm and really look at what we do, but look at it through a different lens. And I am a wild, off the charts empath. So I joke, I love to see people cry, and that's not in a vindictive way. It just means that you're feeling something. And this really was that catapult into empathy building with our supporters.
So Courtney, you were brought into this process once things were finishing up. So what is your role in the cost of living today?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I've sort of been, I guess we can unofficially say like master and commander of it. So anytime we get requests from internal staff, whether that's, they're doing a meeting with legislators or donors or a corporate group, things like that, or whether it's, at a conference or kind of a larger scale event, it's been either I have been the one facilitating it, or I've trained a good number of our staff on multiple different teams on how they can facilitate as well. So in-house, we use this in what I mentioned, our Learn United tours. It's basically the first half of how we talk about all of our work. We want to make sure that we get people in that empathetic mindset before we start telling them kind of all the programmatic details and the nitty-gritty type stuff.
The cost of living is now used on all of United Way for Southeastern Michigan's tours, and it even has a dedicated room in their Detroit office for the experience. So, Courtney, I remember when I first took a tour of your office and we walked around and someone explained the history of United Way, and I remember also watching this really emotional video. But now that you have the cost of living, why is it effective for people to do that in the beginning? How is that a good primer for communicating your message over, say, watching that video?
Really what it comes down to is, I don't want to say active listening, but yes, active listening and active participation, right? So you can sit and watch a video and you might be moved by it, but you're not really a true participant in the decision-making process, and you're not really being held accountable the way that you would be in cost of living. At the end of the day, everyone cares and everyone wants to do good, right? I tend to believe that. But I think the cost of living has helped us shape the narrative where we no longer have to say, or we no longer have the luxury of saying, it doesn't affect us, or it's not me that this is really impacting. When we start looking at some of the statistics for the region, prior to COVID-19 kind of hitting this area, it was right about 44% of the people in our area weren't able to meet their basic needs. And I think when you say that number, it should be staggering and it should shock you. But when you actually start participating in cost of living and you have to assume the identity of someone really struggling and really kind of in it, I think it just shifts the narrative and helps us get a new perspective that I think we all need. And it has been, Devin, I can't say this enough, it has been 100% effective every single time we have facilitated this in a group, whether it's one person or a bajillion people. 100% of the time we have people feeling after and going, oh my gosh, I didn't know. And, really it's helping us kind of open that Pandora's box of interest and dialogue and really where we can take those relationships from there. Because now that we have them kind of by the heartstrings, that's really where we want to open up and say, okay, now that you care and now that you're really in this with us, let's see how we can help get you connected to the things that you're passionate about. Let's see how you can help make a difference in your community.
Based on all the times I've watched different groups of people experience the cost of living, I can confidently say that its success comes down to one core feature. I'm about to spoil what that is, but first, let's go through one of the life events and use it as an example. I'll explain what's going on, what the players are doing, and why the game design is structured this way. And once again, it might be confusing, but I'm the one narrating the experience. Man, this is where having a co-host or something would really come in handy. Anyway, here's the audio from the life event. You're running late for your shift. Look down at your device and tap the button as fast as you can to get yourself to work. So at this point, players are rapidly tapping their device. On the big screen are progress bars, each showing how much more each player needs to keep tapping before they're finished. So for this next part, people's names appear on screen, and they hear my voice explain what happened to them after the life event based on their performance. You don't own a car and the bus was late. You missed an hour of pay and your boss has put you on notice. Due to poor transit options, you have a 50-minute bus commute, which means you just barely made it in time. Your close proximity to work and personal car make getting to work fast and simple. All right, let's examine what's going on here. So, as a reminder, before any of the 5 life events in the experience occur, participants receive asset tokens and must assign them to various categories: food, housing, childcare, healthcare, and education. You can assign 1 to 3 asset tokens per category. The more asset tokens you have in a given category, the more options you have to deal with things related to that life event category. In short, more tokens makes things easier. The life event you just heard falls under one of the housing life events. So what does that mean for the players? Well, if you assigned 3 asset tokens to housing, you only have to tap your screen 10 times. But if you assign 2 asset tokens, you have to make 50 taps. And if you only assigned 1 asset token, you have to tap your screen a staggering 250 times. Which is not impossible, but it is very unlikely you will make it before the time limit is up. The amount of effort participants need to put in to succeed correlates to their avatar's life situation. Players who only have to tap 10 times means they have access to a personal car to get them to work. 50 taps means you have to take the bus, and 250 taps means you need to walk. And if you fail to tap enough times, you lose an asset token, meaning you have to take it away from another category, like food or healthcare. It's not uncommon for people to tease each other as they play the cost of living. For example, during this life event where you're trying to get to work, some players will finish quickly and then proceed to taunt the other participants who are still furiously tapping their screens, as they'll often vocally assume that everyone else is just bad at the game. And that brings me to the last and most important point, the special ingredient that gives all of this its power. This is explained at the end of the cost of living, so I'll play that for you now. It's been a long journey. Let's see how everyone did. Now here's the number of asset tokens everyone started with. And here's the number of asset tokens everyone ended up with. Now you may notice something interesting. Not everyone started with the same number of asset tokens. And as we found, those who start with more typically end up with more. And that is the reality that many people live with. When you're getting through each day on the most basic essentials, it's difficult to pull ahead and get to a place where you're thriving. The experience you've just had is intended to provide you with a glimpse of how life's challenges can impact people differently based on their access to assets and support systems. Our complex institutional systems, like education, healthcare, and housing costs, coupled with social institutions based on economic, racial, and social inequities, can mean that hard work often isn't enough to overcome obstacles. But at the end of the day, we all have the power to unite and create the change we want to see in our communities. Thank you for participating in the cost of living. I've actually seen many people tear up after this part of the experience. even more common are people who are lost in thought as they reflect on their life, their choices, and what led them to where they are now. This is an example of using game design not only to tell a story, but to convey a concept that is difficult to simply explain. And that concept is privilege. Even just saying that word, privilege, it can set certain people off, making them angry and shut down any chance of having a productive conversation. But the cost of living doesn't even have the word privilege in any part of its script. It doesn't need to. Every participant feels privilege.
You know, we would see people sort of chiding like, oh, why is this so hard for you? You know, because they were in the privileged position. And then at the end, watching their face when they realized what had happened. And I think you could almost see the wheels turning in their brain if they ask themselves, do I do this in real life? When something bad happens to someone, do I blame them for their bad choice and not acknowledge that there might be these factors of privilege, you know, or that they don't have privilege that might be the reason why they, you know, people find themselves in these really bad situations, because no one wants to think that this could happen to them. And I think if anything, working with United Way has taught me that bad things happen to everyone, no matter how well you prepare. And that's why it's so important to have these safety nets and a system that helps people when times get bad. Bad stuff can happen at any time. And this experience needed to show people that. And I think that's what I saw with the testing. I would just see them going, oh, crap, like they were correlating the game to their own lives. And that was a really powerful moment for me.
Anytime we talk about equity or inequity or privilege or things like that, it's not as powerful for us just to say, oh, you've got, you know, white privilege or rich privilege or, you know, educated privilege, whatever that is. When you're able to actually see it for yourself, I think it just tells a completely different type of story. And that's, you know, I think to your credit, that was something that really landed and resonates with everyone, because we don't just explicitly come out and say, oh, you're going to face some inequities in this experience, but really having to feel it and to go through it and internalize it. It's just absolutely fantastic. I can't say enough about that. Yeah.
There's one last topic that I want to cover. If you've been listening to the show, this might sound like beating a dead horse, but it's something I feel bears repeating. I mentioned at the beginning that United Way made it clear that we refer to the cost of living not as a game, but as a digital simulation or as an interactive experience. And that is because the content and messages within the cost of living are not what people typically would associate as the kind of content in a game. Poverty and all the challenges that go with it affect millions of people in our country every day. They are people's lived experiences, and they are anything but a fun game. So I completely understand why United Way would be hesitant to label the cost of living as a game. Doing so would send a message to certain people, one that feels insensitive and tone deaf. Most people don't look at games and the kinds of stories they can tell the same way that I do. But it's my mission in life to change this. Because people rely on the power of art to convey the human condition. Art and media helps us explain and organize our world and guide us as we take real-life action. Think of it this way. Let's say someone shot a documentary about poverty. Well, no one would ever say, you can't call that a movie. Movies are about superheroes and animated characters. You should call it a motion picture experience. And that's because you don't need to explain this to anyone, that there's different kinds of movies, films, videos, and television shows that cover different kinds of topics. Virtually everyone knows the difference between if they're watching the nightly news versus an episode of Game of Thrones. And I'm not saying people are so clueless that they can't tell the difference between if they're looking at Call of Duty versus Oregon Trail. But there's a basic literacy about games and a knowledge of different titles that our culture at large still doesn't possess in the same way that we do with TV and film. And this can make it difficult for people who are trying to build games that tell stories and convey experiences most people wouldn't expect, because just mentioning the word game, well, it can turn people away from moving forward with such projects. But what gives me hope is that organizations like United Way are willing to take a chance and try something new. And as a result, they've been able to tell their story and achieve their goals in ways they never have before. And United Way isn't the only one. I can't give specifics, but one of the largest companies in the world was so impressed by the cost of living that they hired us at 24G to build a similar experience for them. It's used by thousands of people on their staff as a training tool to build empathy and understanding into the hiring process so that they can better relate to potential employees and help eliminate hurtful and strongly held biases. Look, I'll admit that the way I often talk about games makes it seem like I think they could fix everything, like they're some sort of magic curative to the world's problems, held back only by people's ignorance to them. Maybe deep down I convince myself of that sometimes. But games are just like any other art form. They're just another way to tell a story. And if I've done my job, then it's helping people realize this potential. And in doing so, they might happen upon something really special, something they wouldn't have found without making a game.
You know, we've been a part of this journey for a couple of years now, so you know this. I really appreciate the work that you guys did to make this possible for us, because it has made us telling our story that much easier, and not just from a, you know, we want to do fundraising, so learn a little bit about us, but really starting to engage different types of people and different types of groups in a different way, and really starting to open that dialogue easier, I'll say, than just, you know, having a meeting or just having a phone call or just giving people stats or, oh, here's a PowerPoint presentation. It's really been a labor of love. And it's something that I'm super proud of, especially for someone who knows nothing about gaming or technology, anything like that. Every time I present this, I get a little choked up because I know how powerful it is. And I know how it's received, you know, like I say, 100% of the time, I'm not making that up, right? It's 100% of the time I see that aha moment and that light bulb moment where people are now emotionally invested in what we do. And it makes it, you know, just that much simpler, I think, to really get them involved in our work. And it's just awesome. That's all I can say. It's just awesome.
The cost of living is really just a conversation starter. It's not going to get into the weeds of what people can do, you know, to help make progress in our society and our communities. But I think that's what makes it really powerful. It's a conversation starter to learn more. And I like that saying, when you know better, you do better. And I'm hoping that that's what this, you know, this experience does for people. It sort of makes them want to know more and then find out how, you know, the power and the agency that they have to make a difference. You know, you and I have spoken a lot about there's just this huge lack of empathy on all sides of the aisle. And I think these experiences, these games can be really powerful to maybe bring people together. It would take a lot of work, and I'm not a psychologist. I don't know how easy it is to change people's minds, but I like to think that people do have more in common than they maybe think they do. We all want to take care of our families. We all want good jobs. We all want a safe place to live, you know, but you also have to have a mindset that you may not be right at everything. And so I think about these games and what sort of people are going to want to experience them.
Me and my colleagues at 24G and United Way are thrilled to be a part of this movement to build games that foster empathy between our fellow human beings. But I think the cost of living is just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many other amazing topics and stories that can be told using games. Games that talk about politics, games that explore sexual identity, games that illustrate gender inequality, games that navigate the numerous facets of climate change, games that tackle the challenges of police brutality, games that explore racial inequities and ways to fix them. There are many game developers and designers out there building these very games, and it's my dream to keep building them too, to use games as a vessel for telling the stories that are profoundly affecting our world today. The cost of living helped me shape this dream, and I can't wait to meet the partners and organizations who are willing to take a chance with me and build the games that tell the defining stories of our time. The Curious Gamer was written, produced, and voiced by me, Devin Polaski. This is actually the first episode of my show where I composed all the music you heard, instead of just some of it with music from whatever game I was talking about. Special thanks to Valerie West and Courtney Ochelek for lending their time and thoughts and for making the cost of living what it is. Please subscribe to this show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can watch and listen to the show on YouTube. And it really, really helps the show out if you can leave a 5-star review or share the show with a friend who you think might be interested. You can do this and learn more about the show at thecuriousgamer.org. Finally, if you're looking for a game to play right now, don't hesitate to drop me a note. You can write to me using the built-in message form on the website. I promise I'll help you find the perfect game to play. It's actually one of my favorite things to do. Thank you for listening. Thank you to all the people making our society function during this time. And thank you to the brave people who are protesting and lending their voices for good. And remember this, no matter what you're doing, whether you're feeling up or down, you're never too old to enjoy your life and play.